Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Laura Musica Show, your favorite update in the battle for life, family, and freedom. So excited once again to have you with me. I'm Laura Musica, attorney and human rights advocate, and I serve as president and CEO of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, the nation's largest sidewalk outreach organization. Last week, we started a conversation with former Planned Parenthood director Abby Johnson, and today we're hosting part 2 of that discussion. For those of you who are just jumping into the conversation and still getting to know Abby spent 8 years with Planned Parenthood, America's abortion empire, and quickly rose through its ranks to become a clinic director. Now, everything changed in September of 2009 when Abby was asked to assist with an ultrasound-guided abortion, where she watched a 13-week-old baby fight and struggle for his life. She left and sought the support of the local peaceful pro-life group, and soon became pro-life herself, traveling the nation and the world, sharing her testimony. Today, Abby is arguably the most sought-after international pro-life speaker. She's the author of 4 books, 2 documentaries, and her story was turned into a movie. She's the founder of And Then There Were None, Abortion Worker Ministry, a ministry designed to help abortion clinic workers transition out of the industry without fear of exploitation, and Pro-Love Ministries, which fills service gaps in the pro-life movement. Let's welcome back to the show, Abby Johnson. Hey there, Abby.
Hello. Thanks for having me back.
So glad to continue the conversation. Again, folks, if you have not heard part 1 of the discussion, you have to go back at some point and listen to it. It's so incredibly powerful. So again, so honored to continue the conversation with you, Abby. Let me go ahead and jump right in. For those who go to abortion facilities or otherwise have someone in their life that works for the industry, what are the top 2 or 3 tips that you have for them in helping abortion workers quit?
I tell people most everybody who works in the industry has a reason why. There's usually a story as to why they got there. Um, it might just simply be because they were struggling and this was the only job that they could find. But they were, in a financially vulnerable place. And so if that's the case, then they might need additional job training to get them, into a better job. But most of the time, it's because they have a personal story surrounding abortion. So they themselves have had an abortion. They've had an abortion at that clinic where they're working. They've taken someone to have an abortion. There's something there usually surrounding abortion. And so getting to kind of the root of that, I think, is really important. And we hear all the time, we read it in scripture that, when Jesus was asked a question, he usually answered with a question. So I think asking questions is really important. And it's really biblical. Asking questions to get, answers to these really difficult moral issues. Right? I think we make a lot of assumptions about people who are on the other side of these sort of issues. We're like, oh, these people, they work in the clinics because they hate babies, or because because they think this about women, or because they think this about the unborn, and that may not necessarily be true. Most everyone who works in these abortion clinics, they are mothers. They don't hate babies. They don't hate children. They're not, dangerous around children or anything like that. They just have a story. And I think if we can get to the heart of that, I can tell you almost every woman, we've had over 700 women come through our ministry, and myself and one other woman were the only 2 that does not have a history of childhood abuse. That's crazy. So there's some deep wounds, right? Deep trauma in the lives of a lot of these women that have kind of led them to a place where they are lured in by an organization that would devalue them, that would dehumanize them, that would dehumanize others.
Yeah, absolutely. So important. Again, we had a really rich discussion last show about how people even get into the industry in the first place, right? So I just encourage everyone, again, if you have not heard it, you have to go back and listen to part 1. But I think you're so right, Abby. It's so important that we don't make assumptions about other people or demonize the other side. we just really need to understand that these are people that have been hurt in some way or affected in some way by abortion. That can be a really powerful starting point to just understanding that. It would allow us to bridge gaps, to build a relationship over time, to encourage people to plant seeds. So important. We've got some big things that are going on, Abby, in the culture and in our movement. I want to go back and ask you a few global questions, your opinion about some of these things. Here at Sidewalk Advocates for Life, we don't attack or criticize people, but we do discuss ideas. And recently, there's been a resurgence of a kind of law-breaking approach at an abortion facility. Of course, we're in an era right now of a weaponized FBI and DOJ. They are absolutely treating pro-lifers differently from pro-abortion people. Of course, we just need to first know that and understand that. But as far as an approach in saving lives, closing abortion facilities with our eyes on the end goal, Abby, how do you feel, or what cautions you when it comes to taking a law-breaking approach, walking into these facilities and maybe initially offering help, but then switching to a protest-oriented disposition? How do you feel about that as opposed to the type of outreach that eventually won you out of the industry?
Well, I don't support law breaking in general. Um, I think it's a huge waste. I I look at, these people who are now in prison for multiple years. And, a few of them I know personally. A few of them I've been on the sidewalk with. And I know they're very effective on the sidewalk. And I think, man, what a loss. What a loss for all of us on the sidewalk. What a loss for our work trying to save babies from that last, just at that last minute, you know? And I think, wow, I mean, how many lives could be saved in those years that they're going to be in prison, just sitting there, where they could be out on the sidewalk directly interacting with women who have abortion appointments, in that next hour to take the lives of their children. I think it's a huge waste. I think it's a huge distraction to our movement when we have life-saving techniques that work, like what you guys are doing. We know that works. I've said for a long time, if there was something, if they were doing something that was really effective, then I'd be like, all right, like I'm in it, let's break the law. Like let's do it, but it's not proven to be effective. It's actually proven to be detrimental to the movement. It's proven to be detrimental to our cause. You can't find one former abortion worker that supports this sort of activity. And to me, that's kind of a litmus test, I think, for me. Like people who have been inside, people who have witnessed this happen, people who have seen exactly what it does to the women inside who are waiting. And what they're telling us is that it really doesn't stop abortions. It only scares the women. It makes the pro-lifers, it makes them it makes them fit the stereotype of what they already believe pro-lifers to be, right? Because when a woman books an appointment for an abortion, we tell her there might be pro-lifers outside. They're very aggressive. They're very scary. Don't look at them. Don't talk to them. Keep your windows rolled up. Go right to the building. Park as close to the building as you can. We're going to have escorts outside. They're going to come to your door. They're going to walk with you from the front door. From your car to the front door. Don't look at the pro-lifers. We warn them, right? Yeah. We prep them for this in an attempt to make the pro-life movement scary. Okay. So then they make it inside, right? And then here come all these pro-lifers like bum rushing the waiting room. And even though they're like, oh, it's peaceful, it doesn't feel peaceful. Trespassing doesn't feel peaceful. Going and entering a place where you're not supposed to be doesn't feel peaceful. It just doesn't. And, when people are asking you, when they're like, get out, you're not supposed to be, we're calling the police, get out. And then you just go limp on the floor and police have to come and they have to drag you out. You may say that's peaceful just because you didn't get in a fight, but that doesn't feel like peace to the woman who's sitting in there. It just doesn't. Right. And so now these women, they're not going to come to you. You've just disrupted their life in this huge way. And now you fit every single stereotype that the pro-abortion people told them that you were. Yeah. That you're scary, that you're weird, that you're like a terrorist. All the things that they told them that you were, now you are. And so you're no longer a safe person. And now you're sitting in prison for it. And I think people try to compare like what happened during the civil rights movement and like the Birmingham jail with MLK Jr. and all this. We don't live in those times anymore. We now live in a time where our DOJ, our administration, back then during that time, MLK was in Birmingham jail and they were like, well, they can't arrest us all, right? So we're just going to we're just going to do it because they can't arrest us all. Well, they can't arrest us all now. And they will. And they would love to. The DOJ would love nothing more than to throw 5,000 pro-lifers in jail for violating the FACE Act. That would make their day. They would throw 10,000 of us in jail if they had to, 20,000 of us in prison. They would do it. So this idea that somehow we're going to overtake the DOJ, that there's going to be so many of us that they're like it was in Birmingham, there's going to be so many of us, they're not going to know how to process all of us. We don't live in that time anymore. We have a much more sophisticated system. They will absolutely prosecute every single one of us that does this. I mean, so that's such a false idea. We live in a very different time. We cannot compare the two movements. We cannot compare those two scenarios. It's not the world that we live in.
Yeah. I've even said when discussing that topic that I'm not even meaning to litigate Operation Rescue, the peaceful activist movement of the 80s and 90s. I understand why they at least tried it, right? Like, hey, maybe we'll cause enough nonviolent chaos and the Supreme Court might go, oh my gosh, what did we do? Right? We tried it. But with modern conditions, especially with where millennials and Gen Z are right now, all these things taken into consideration, much less the idea that as soon as you cross that line, like you said, abortion workers are then able to turn to the women in the waiting room and say, these people are dangerous. They just broke the law there. Now everybody's wondering, how far is this group going to go, right? And I think about that in contrast with peaceful, loving, winsome sidewalk advocacy, where you're able to prove time and again that you're peaceful, where you're just offering options and resources. One of the top questions that we at Sidewalk Advocates for Life get from clients that are going in is, oh, hey, by the way, where are the protesters that they told me about?
You're like, it's me.
Right? And I always laugh, right? Usually it's when we're walking them over to the pregnancy center, we've been able to connect with them and help them. That's really the way that it's supposed to be, right? The idea here is that then we completely obliterated that image and we've replaced it with an image that is peaceful, loving, professional. So, because we're willing to stay on the sidewalk, which is really the great equalizer where we can exercise our First Amendment rights and we can just, be human beings reaching out to other human beings that want to help, there really is a power in that. There's a safety in that. And that safety has to be there for women to change their minds on abortion. I have to win their trust in order to get them to go to a life affirming pregnancy center and abandon their abortion appointment, right? It's so important. So, Abby, let me ask you about this. The abortion van outside the Democratic National Convention a few months ago, courtesy of Planned Parenthood, they were offering free abortions and free vasectomies. Why are you not surprised?
Yeah. So I, you know, I would like to say I was surprised that there was like an abortion van outside the DNC, but it's so on par for, who they are. I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess that makes sense. Um, to have an abortion ban. They said that I think they committed about 25 abortions. Um, my friend Angela Stanton King was out there. She said she saw primarily Black women going in and on and off the bus, which that's typical. That's their target demographic. Um, I, it was all, I mean, it was kind of like a circus, right? They've got an abortion van. They've got an inflatable IUD. It reminded me of the scene in Patch Adams where it's like the OBGYN conference and he has the big inflatable legs welcoming, the doctors in. It was like almost comical, except it's just so sad. And then, they're doing the vasectomies and, there are people that are like, oh, I don't care. I don't care if, these men are getting vasectomies. I'm like, I do care. Like, I care. I care that they are removing men's fertility when they're 23, 24 years old before their brain is even fully formed. Like, I do care. I feel like we're watching the demise of Western civilization, like right in front of our eyes. Like we're watching families just implode right in front of us. Right. I mean, there was just a recent study that said something like almost 45% of women will be single and childless by 2030. And that is really sad to me. Um, that, women are just only thinking about themselves. They're only thinking about their careers. They're only thinking about um, their own income and what they want to do with their lives. And um, they don't want to get married. They don't want to do life with someone else. They just want to do life on their own with their girlfriends or whatever. We've lost the importance of family in this country. We've lost the importance of sacrifice for others. It's really sad to see. And, I do care that we're so flippantly willing to sterilize young people, and call that progress. That's that's not progress to me. Um, I think it's regression kind of in the worst way.
So true. Abby, last question. What is the biggest challenge that you see that we face as a movement, and what's your advice for overcoming it?
I think the biggest challenge is right now kind of sticking to the battle. Like I just said, I think there's a lot of people who are willing to just give up because the state battle is not going the direction they want. They feel like, well, the GOP's taking the pro-life plank out. So like, why even fight anymore? Or what difference am I making? Right. Just let the PRCs handle it. Just, and I think we become very forgetful and we let other things take precedent over the greatest human rights tragedy of our time, and that's abortion. We think securing the border is more important than protecting thousands of children in the womb every day. We think, I don't know. We think the cost of groceries is more important than babies being torn apart in their mother's wombs every day. We become so, our priorities become so out of whack so easily, so fast. And I think keeping the main issue, even in the pro-life movement, it's tough right now. And so we just have to keep spreading that message clearly of why it is that we do what we do, why it is we take the time, why do we have these organizations to begin with? Why is it that we make the sacrifice? Why is the sacrifice important? Because ultimately it's the babies that are making the ultimate sacrifice. And we have to keep them at the forefront.
So well said. So good. Well, Abby, it's always a joy just to talk with you and hear your wisdom. And again, I hope everyone will understand the fact that Abby saw abortion with her own eyes. She smelled it. She participated in it. She experienced it. This is real for her, right? And it's real for 700 other former workers that she has helped to lead out of the abortion industry. This is not just an esoteric political issue for all of these folks. This is a real human issue to Abby and to these workers. So Abby, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being on the show. So great.
Thanks, Lauren.
All right. Well, in closing, I just want to encourage all of us to be careful. Sometimes we are tempted to think that person is never going to change. That person is beyond God's reach. They've already chosen. But if we're truly humble, we'll realize that we are all works in progress, prodigal sons, converts, reverts, and sinners who, but for the grace of God, go I. All we have to do is look at the story of Saul to Paul. Saul used to kill people, but he became a great saint and the writer of many books of the New Testament. Adrienne Moten is a former abortion worker who helped kill babies after birth in famous abortionist Kermit Gosnell's facility. She went to prison for 2 years. But I'll never forget the moment she shared her testimony at the Pro-Life Women's Conference and sang Amazing Grace, proclaiming what God had done to heal her wreckage and bring her to abundant life. One of the most powerful things that I ever heard Abby say is that given the right circumstances, you or I could have worked for the abortion industry too. Try that thought on for size. Be careful if you're tempted to say, oh, I would have never done that. I'm realizing as I move through life that it's so important we have a healthy understanding of just how far we all can fall without God by our side. My sin may not be your sin, but we're all human beings in need of a Savior. And without His grace, we won't get very far on our own merit and strength. So, come home to Him today. Place your trust in Him. Follow Him. And He's sure to give you His abundant life, peace, and freedom in exchange. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Lauren Musica Show. We'll be back here next Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central on Facebook Live, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Thanks so much, everyone.